Beneath the moon's unyielding silver sickle, a fragile thread of fate unraveled in the frozen heart of the pack. The wind howled through the jagged peaks of the Silverfang Mountains, carrying the scent of pine and impending doom. Alara stood at the edge of the gathering circle, her bare feet sinking into the crisp snow that blanketed the ancient stone altar. The cold clawed at her skin like invisible talons, but it was nothing compared to the chill of betrayal seeping into her bones. She was an Omega, born to the pack's fringes, her life a quiet service to those stronger, fiercer. Yet tonight, under the full moon's watchful eye, her quiet had shattered. The elders encircled her, their furred cloaks dusted with frost, eyes glowing like embers in the torchlight. Alpha Thorn, broad-shouldered and scarred from battles long past, loomed at the center. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. "The pack has spoken. Alara's weakness endangers us all. Her failure to heed the call of the hunt, her visions that distract rather than guide. These are omens of ruin, exile forever. Let the wilds claim what the pack cannot." Murmurs rippled through the assembled wolves, some in human form like Alara, others shifting restlessly between shapes. The air thickened with the metallic tang of tension, the crackle of flames from the central fire pit casting long shadows that danced like specters. Alara's hand instinctively rose to the moonstone pendant at her throat, a simple heirloom from her mother, its pale glow pulsing faintly against her skin. It had been her only anchor in a world that demanded submission, a whispered promise of something more than servitude. Now, it felt like a noose. She had always known she was different. Whispers of dreams plagued her sleep, visions of paths unseen, of bloodied moons and wandering souls. The pack dismissed them as Omega folly, but last moon's hunt, her warning had come too late. A rival clan's ambush left 3 warriors dead, their bodies torn and steaming in the snow. Blame fell on her, the seer who saw nothing useful, the weak link in their chain. Rejection wasn't new. Omegas were vessels for the strong. But this was finality. Exile forever meant death in the unforgiving wilds, where blizzards buried the unwary and lone wolves starved under the indifferent stars. Alara's breath came in shallow gasps, fogging the air before her. She met Thorn's gaze, searching for mercy in those steel-gray eyes, but found only the weight of duty. He was a good alpha, bound by the ancient laws etched into the pack's soul. Survival demanded sacrifice. Her heart ached not for herself, but for the quiet life she had woven, tending fires, mending wounds, offering solace in the dead of night. What was strength, if not enduring the shadows others cast? The vote had been cast earlier that evening, under the gathering dusk. Howls echoed from the peaks, each a verdict sealed in primal sound. All in favor of exile, 30 voices strong. Alara had stood silent, her own voice stolen by the gravity of it all. The fire's warmth had mocked her then, its golden tongues licking the cold air while her world crumbled. Now, as the elders raised their hands in unison, affirming the sentence, a sob caught in her throat. The snow around her feet began to stain red from a small cut on her palm. Where her nails had dug too deep, a tiny river of blood mirroring the life's blood spilled because of her perceived failure. But then, from the huddled forms at the circle's edge, a sound pierced the night. Small, tremulous, yet defiant. A pup's howl. Little Mira, no more than 8 winters old, Alara's shadow in the dens, the one she had sung lullabies to under starlit skies. The child shifted partially, her tiny frame furred and quivering, eyes wide with a fierce, unchildlike clarity. Her howl wasn't a cry of fear, but a plea woven with instinct, raw and unfiltered. It rose, pure and piercing, cutting through the elders' murmurs like a blade through silk. The pack stilled. Thorn's head snapped toward the sound, his brow furrowing. Pups didn't vote. Their voices were the future's echo, not the present's command. Yet Mira's howl carried the weight of something ancient, a thread pulled from the Deusa's loom. Whispers turned to questions. "The moon speaks through her," one elder muttered, glancing skyward where the silver sickle hung low, bathing the snow in ethereal light. Thorn raised a hand, silencing the unrest. He knelt before Mira, his massive form gentle as he touched her snout. "What vision drives you, little one?" The pup's eyes, mirrors of Ilara's own haunted blue, fixed on the Omega. In that gaze, Ilara saw her own dreams reflected, flashes of a shadowed figure, wounded and wandering, a path through the storm that led not to death, but to reckoning. The Alpha straightened, conflict etching deeper lines into his face. The Deusa's will is not always clear, but a pup's howl in counsel. It bends the law. He turned to the pack, his voice steady yet laced with reluctance. "Exile, but not to death. Banishment to the borderlands. Let her prove her visions or perish by her own hand. The pack endures." Relief warred with dread in Ilara's chest. Not forever in the wilds, but cast out all the same, alone, marked as the flawed one. The elders nodded, the fire crackling as if in approval, its sparks rising like fleeing souls. As the circle broke, wolves dispersing into the whispering woods, Ilara clutched her moonstone pendant tighter. Its cool surface warmed against her palm, the blood from her cut smearing its facets, turning the stone a fleeting crimson. She stepped back into the night, the wind whipping her ragged cloak, carrying the distant huevos of the pack fading behind her. The borderlands awaited, treacherous foothills where blizzards howled like vengeful spirits and forgotten paths twisted under the moon's gaze. What strength was there in Mercy's shadow? As snowflakes kissed her tear-streaked face, Ilara wondered if her visions had lied, or if this banishment was the first step toward a destiny she could scarcely fathom. The pendant pulsed once more, a silent vow amid the gathering storm. The borderlands stretched like a scar across the earth's frozen hide, where the Silverfang Mountains bled into jagged foothills shrouded in perpetual twilight. Ilara trudged onward, the weight of her banishment pressing heavier than the snow-laden cloak draped over her shoulders. Each step crunched through the crust of ice, sending shards skittering into the void, while the wind clawed at her exposed skin, whispering taunts of isolation. The moonstone pendant swung against her chest, its surface still tacky with the dried smear of her blood, a crimson vein trapped in translucent stone, pulsing faintly as if alive with her unresolved pain. It had been her mother's, a relic from a time when visions were gifts, not curses. Now it mocked her exile, a solitary light in the encroaching dark. Night deepened, the sky a vast indigo vault pierced by stars that offered no warmth. Ilara's breath came in ragged clouds, her body aching from the forced march away from the pack's hearth. She had gathered what little she could, a water skin, a flint for fire, and the tattered blanket that smelled of the dens she would never return to. The visions that had damned her flickered at the edges of her mind, fragments of shadowed paths, a lone figure limned in moonlight, bloodied and unbowed. But they dissolved like mist under the relentless gale, leaving only the gnawing hunger of doubt. What mercy was this from a pup's howl? A slower death, perhaps, in these forsaken reaches where rival packs prowled and the wild claimed the weak without remorse. She crested a ridge, the terrain dropping into a narrow ravine where twisted pines clawed at the sky like skeletal fingers. The air grew thicker here, laced with the metallic bite of blood and the acrid tang of smoke. Ilara froze, her senses sharpening instinctively. A low groan echoed from below, not the wind's howl, but something primal, wounded, a sound that tugged at the omega in her, urging submission or flight. Fear coiled in her gut, cold as the snow seeping through her boots, yet curiosity stirred, unbidden, like a spark in dry tinder. She should run. The borderlands were no place for the solitary. but the pendant warmed against her skin, its bloodied glow intensifying as if drawing her forward. Peering over the edge, she saw him. A man, no, an alpha, sprawled against a boulder, his form half-shifted, furred limbs trembling in the effort to hold human shape. His cloak was rent, dark with blood that pooled beneath him, staining the snow in a deepening crimson halo. Broad-shouldered even in collapse, he clutched a gash across his ribs, where claw marks wept fresh scarlet. His face, etched with lines of exhaustion and something deeper, guilt, perhaps, turned toward the sound of her approach. Eyes the color of storm-tossed seas met hers, and in that instant the world narrowed to the thrum of her pulse, echoing his labored breaths. Instinct surged through Alara like a current, raw and undeniable. The air between them hummed with it, the ancient pull of Alpha and Omega, a thread woven by the Deusa herself. Her body yearned to kneel, to offer aid, to soothe the storm raging in his gaze. But denial crashed in its wake, sharp as the wind's bite. He was a stranger, marked by violence. She, the exiled failure, harbored no strength to give. Fear whispered of traps, rival scouts perhaps, sent to finish what the pack had spared. Yet curiosity held her rooted, her fingers tightening around the pendant, its warmth seeping into her palm like a forbidden promise. Who approaches? His voice was gravel and thunder, laced with pain but commanding all the same. He pushed himself upright, wincing, his free hand flexing as if ready to shift fully, to defend or destroy. Silver hair fell across his brow, matted with sweat and frost, and a faint scar traced his jawline, old as the mountains themselves. King? The word flickered unbidden in her mind, born of the regal set to his shoulders, the quiet authority that bent even agony to his will. But kings did not bleed out in forgotten ravines. Alara stepped closer, cautious, her boots sinking into the blood-tinged snow. The scent of him enveloped her, pine and iron, fury and sorrow intertwined. An outcast, she replied, her voice steady, despite the tremor in her limbs. No threat to you. Lies and truths mingled. She was no threat, but the pull between them felt like one, a danger to the fragile walls she had built around her heart. He studied her, those eyes piercing the veil of night, seeing too much, the pendant's glow, the shadows of rejection in her stance. A flicker of recognition crossed his features, not of her face, but of her essence, the quiet strength of one who had endured the pack's scorn. Outcast, he echoed, a bitter laugh escaping through gritted teeth. Then we are kin in ruin. He extended a hand, not in dominance but plea, the gesture cracking the ice of her resolve. Blood slicked his fingers, mirroring the stain on her stone. She hesitated, the wind howling its warning, distant weavos rising from the peaks like echoes of judgment. To help him was to invite entanglement, to deny the exile's solitude that was her punishment. Yet the pendant burned hotter, its crimson heart sinking with the ragged rhythm of his breath. Fear warred with the instinctive draw, curiosity blooming into something perilously like hope. What was redemption, if not reaching into the dark for another broken soul? Kneeling beside him, Alara tore a strip from her cloak, pressing it to his wound. His skin was fever-hot under her touch, the contact sending sparks through her veins. He tensed, a growl rumbling low, but did not pull away. In the silence that followed, broken only by the crackle of settling snow and their shared exhales, the connection took root, fragile, resisted, yet undeniable. The moon watched from above, its silver light gilding the blood on her hands, as if the Deusa herself approved this perilous convergence. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. The ravine cradled them like a reluctant tomb, its walls of ice-slicked stone rising sharp and unforgiving under the moon's pallid gaze. Ilara's hands trembled as she bound the Alpha's wound, the strip of cloak soaking through with his blood, warm and viscous against the night's relentless chill. His name he had rasped in the quiet that followed her touch. Kyle, once king of the Ironclaw realm, now a fugitive shadow haunted by the ghosts of his throne. The word hung between them, heavy as the frost-laden air, stirring visions in her mind's eye. A crown of thorns, a betrayal under blood moon, a pack torn asunder by ambition's blade. She pushed the images away, focusing on the task, on the steady pressure that slowed the crimson flow from his ribs. He watched her, those storm-sea eyes half-lidded with pain, yet piercing in their intensity. No command laced his gaze, only a weary gratitude that chipped at the walls of her wariness. The pull between them deepened with every shared breath, an instinctive tether that both soothed and terrified. Omega to Alpha, it whispered of surrender, of healing through submission. But Ilara had learned long ago that yielding brought only chains. Still, as her fingers brushed his fevered skin, a spark ignited, not of dominance, but of shared fracture. His guilt mirrored her shame, two exiles forged in the fires of rejection. The wind shifted, carrying a new scent on its wings, musk and malice, the rank odor of pursuit. Kale's body tensed beneath her hands, a low growl vibrating through his chest like distant thunder. "They come," he murmured, his voice a blade sheathed in velvet. "My brother's hunters, traitors to the blood oath." He tried to rise, but weakness buckled his knees, sending fresh blood seeping through the bandage. Ilara's heart hammered, the moonstone pendant flaring hot against her throat, its bloodied core throbbing in rhythm with the approaching threat. Visions flickered unbidden, shadows slinking through the pines, fangs bared, eyes gleaming with the fervor of vengeance. She scanned the ravine, the twisted trees offering scant cover, their branches clawing at the star-pricked sky like desperate pleas. No time for flight. The footsteps echoed now, crunching snow with predatory precision. 3 figures emerged from the gloom, shifted wolves, their forms hulking and furred, breaths fogging in feral snarls. The leader, a brute with a notched ear and scars like lightning across his muzzle, locked eyes on Kale. "The false king bleeds out," he snarled, voice thick with triumph. "The realm will feast on your heart, brother slayer." Politics of the court, Ilara realized in a rush, Kale's guilt not for murder, but for refusing a war that would have drowned the lands in blood. His brother's coup, painted as justice, hunted him through these border wilds. Fear clawed at Ilara's throat, cold as the snow biting her palms, but instinct surged, fierce and unyielding. She could flee, vanish into the night as her exile demanded, leaving this stranger to his fate. The pack had cast her out for weakness. Why tether herself to another's ruin? Yet, as Kale's hand gripped hers, not in command but alliance, empathy bloomed, raw and transformative. He was broken as she, marked by choices that scarred deeper than claws. What was strength, if not standing against the storm for one who saw her not as vessel, but equal? "Run," Kale urged, his grip tightening, but she shook her head, the pendant's warmth stealing her resolve. Together, they scrambled behind a fallen log, its bark splintered and snow-dusted, the ravine's shadows swallowing their forms. Ilara's breath came shallow, her body pressed close to his, the heat of him a bulwark against the encroaching cold. The hunters prowled nearer, their paws silent now, sniffing the air thick with blood and fear. One paused, nose twitching toward their hiding place, and Ilara's mind raced, visions coalescing not as curse, but weapon. She clutched the pendant, its crimson heart pulsing, and whispered to the Diusa under her breath, "Guide the unseen path." The stone warmed, visions sharpening into clarity. "The left ridge," she breathed to Kale, her voice a thread of certainty amid the terror. "Loose stones. Bring them down." He nodded, trust flickering in his eyes like torchlight on ice, and with a pained shift, he hurled a rock into the underbrush on the opposite side. The diversion worked. The hunters lunged toward the sound, their bulk crashing through brittle branches. Ilara seized the moment, her hands finding purchase on the ridge's edge. She dislodged a cascade of ice and stone, the avalanche roaring down like the Deusa's wrath, burying the nearest wolf in a tumult of white and gray. Chaos erupted, snarls turning to yelps as the survivors scattered, one limping away with a shattered limb. The leader, howling, curses into the night. Kyle pulled her back, his arm around her waist, a shield of muscle and resolve, their bodies entwined in the refuge's narrow crevice. The air hummed with the aftermath, the crunch of settling snow, the distant fade of weavos, the shared rhythm of their hearts pounding like war drums. Blood from his wound smeared her sleeve, mingling with the frost on her skin, a visceral bond sealed in the night's fury. In the silence that followed, empathy unfurled like a rose in frozen earth, tentative, thorned, yet blooming. Kyle's gaze met hers, the guilt in his eyes softening to something vulnerable, human. "You could have left me," he said softly, his thumb tracing the pendant's chain, careful not to touch the bloodied stone. "Why stay?" Ilara swallowed, the weight of her exile pressing close, but his presence, a king unthroned, ethical in his melancholy, stirred a quiet fire within. "Because the Deusa weaves threads in the dark," she replied, her voice steady despite the tremor of revelation. "And yours. It calls to mine." He nodded, the connection deepening. Resisted no longer but embraced in the refuge's fragile peace. The moon hung low, its silver light filtering through the pines, gilding their shared sanctuary. Yet doubt lingered, a spiritual whisper. Was this bond redemption, or the prelude to greater loss? The pendant cooled against her skin, its crimson pulse a reminder that healing demanded risk, that love's proof lay not in crowns, but in the choice to stand unbroken beside another. As the wind sighed through the ravine, carrying away the echoes of pursuit, Ilara leaned into him, the warmth of his body chasing the cold from her bones, forging empathy into something perilously like destiny. The crevice's chill seeped into Ilara's marrow like a lover's regret, the stone walls pressing close in the aftermath of the avalanche's roar. Snow sifted down in lazy veils, blanketing the ravine's floor where the hunter's broken form lay half-buried, a silent testament to the fragile line between survival and oblivion. Kale's breath ghosted against her neck, steady now, the fever in his veins cooling under the moon's watchful pallor. His arm remained around her waist, not possessive but anchoring, as if the night itself conspired to bind their fractures. The moonstone pendant rested heavy between them, its bloodied heart a dim ember against her skin, whispering of paths yet unseen. Ilara shifted, the ache in her limbs a dull echo of the fear that had propelled her. Visions had guided her hand in the chaos, clear, insistent, like threads pulled taut by the Deusa's invisible loom. But as the adrenaline ebbed, doubt crept in, cold and insidious. Her gift had always been a curse, fragmented dreams that the pack scorned as Omega weakness. What use were glimpses of shadow when they failed to save the hunted? Yet here, in this hidden fold of the world, it had manifested not as warning, but as salvation, for him at least. She pulled away slightly, meeting his gaze, those storm-sea eyes reflecting the silver light filtering through the pines above. The stone. "It showed me the ridge," she murmured, her voice threading through the silence like smoke. "Not a dream this time, a certainty." Kyle's brow furrowed, his fingers brushing the pendant's chain with a reverence that belied his king's bearing. The touch sent a shiver through her, not of cold, but of the instinctive pull that warred with her resolve. He was no mere wanderer. The weight of his exile carried the scent of iron and ancient oaths, a realm's ruin etched into his scars. "Certainty," he echoed, the word tasting of disbelief and hunger. I've sought such guidance through blood and fire, only to find betrayal's blade. If your visions spared us. His voice trailed, laced with the melancholy of one who had commanded legions, yet knelt to fate's cruelty. Guilt shadowed his features, a crown heavier than any forged of gold. The remorse of a ruler who had chosen peace over conquest, only to lose his throne to kin's ambition. The wind howled anew, carrying distant weavos that twisted like knives in the night, a reminder that the hunter's pack would return, their betrayal a tide unrelenting. Elara rose, drawing him with her, his weight leaning into her side as they ventured deeper into the crevice's embrace. Twisted roots formed a natural alcove, sheltered by an overhang of ice-crusted rock where she kindled a small fire with trembling hands. Flint sparked against steel, flames licking the air with greedy tongues, casting flickering gold across his pale features. The warmth chased the frost from their bones, but not the chill of unspoken truths. She fed the blaze with brittle branches, the crackle mingling with the soft patter of melting snow, while Kale watched, his breath sinking with hers in the fire's hypnotic dance. As embers bloomed, the pendant ignited, a sudden flare that bathed her vision in ethereal light. Elara gasped, clutching it, the bloodied stone pulsing like a second heart. Images cascaded unbidden, not fragments, but a tapestry woven whole. She saw Kale enthroned in a hall of frost-hewn stone, his brother's shadow looming with a dagger of poisoned silver. Blood moon rising over the Ironclaw peaks, where a pathfinder's call turned the tide of war, her call, her voice echoing through the storm, guiding the faithful to reclaim what was lost. The Diusa's symbols swirled, a wolf's silhouette against lunar fire, a rose of ice blooming from barren soil, and at its center, the moonstone, crimson-veined, unlocking chains of destiny. She staggered, the fire's heat blurring with the vision's fervor, her knees buckling to the snow-damp earth. "It's you," she whispered, eyes wide as the revelation settled, heavy as fresh-fallen white. "The shadowed king in my dreams, the one who wanders not to die, but to be reborn. And I, the pathfinder they called cursed." The words hung poetic and raw, philosophy born of firelight. What was destiny, if not the hidden light piercing rejection's veil? Her gift, long dismissed as folly, unfurled here in exile's hush, a spiritual compass pointing not to submission, but to power born of compassion. Kyle knelt before her, his hand cupping her face, thumb tracing the tear-streaked path down her cheek. The contact was electric, resisted no longer. His touch ignited the bond, empathy forging into recognition. "The key," he breathed, awe threading his voice like silver in stone. All this time, the Diusa's riddle spoke of an Omega's sight, one who sees beyond the hunt's bloodlust. "My realm fractures under war's shadow. My brother's coup rallies the ambitious, promising glory in slaughter. But you, your visions could reveal the true paths, turn allies from foes, heal the wounds I've borne alone." His eyes, once guarded by guilt's armor, softened with a tragic hope, the ethical king glimpsing redemption not in conquest, but in her quiet strength. Yet the revelation carried thorns. Elara pulled back, the fire's warmth mocking the inner cold of choice. To embrace this was to step from exile into a maelstrom, politics of packs and thrones, where her gift might save him, but doom her further. The pack had banished her for less. What mercy could crown one who meddled in king's fates? Blood from the pendant trickled anew, a droplet falling to sizzle in the flames, symbol of the sacrifice demanded. Kyle's gaze held hers, pleading without demand, his melancholy a mirror to her despair. "I won't bind you," he said, voice resonant with duty's weight. "But if you are the Diusa's thread, will you weave with me? Or does freedom lie in the wilds alone?" The question pierced, a moral crossroads under the moon's indifferent sickle. love as proof, demanding she choose between the solitude of rebirth and the peril of destiny's embrace. The fire popped, sparks rising like fleeing souls, while Weavos echoed closer, the night alive with spiritual urgency. Ilara's hand found his, the pendant bridging their palms, its crimson pulse a vow unspoken. Strength was not in isolation, but in the mercy of revelation, the faith that rejection could birth something eternal. As the visions faded, leaving only the fire's glow and his steady gaze, she nodded, the bond sealing in silence, a fragile flame against the gathering storm. Subscribe if you believe mercy can crown even the fallen. The fire's embers had long since dwindled to ash-gray whispers when the Weavos shattered the dawn's fragile hush, a chorus of primal fury rolling down from the Ironclaw peaks like an avalanche of judgment. Ilara's eyes snapped open, her body curled against Kyle's in the alcove's shadowed cradle. The moonstone pendant, a cool weight between them, its crimson vein dulled but insistent. The night had woven them closer in stolen hours, whispers of realms lost, visions shared by firelight, but now the world intruded, raw and unforgiving. His arm tightened around her waist, not in possession, but protection. His breath warm against her temple as the sounds grew nearer, the crunch of paws on snow, the low snarls of a pack closing in. She rose with him, the cold air biting like fangs, her ragged cloak dusted with frost that cracked under her movements. The ravine's mouth loomed ahead, a jagged portal to the foothills where mist clung to the pines like spectral veils. Kale's wound had scabbed under her care, but pain etched his features, a king's resolve hardening against the pallor of blood loss. "My brother," he murmured, voice a gravel-edged blade, eyes scanning the gloom with the melancholy of one who knew betrayal's taste too well. "Eldrick, he comes not for mercy, but the throne's final nail." Guilt flickered in his gaze, not for the coup that had unthroned him, but for the war he had refused, a war that would have spilled rivers of blood across the frozen lands, claiming innocence in ambition's name. Ilara's heart clenched, the pendant warming as visions stirred, a circle of elders under torchlight, her own pack's faces twisted in accusation, and beyond them, Eldrick's shadow merging with thorns, alliances forged in secret pacts. The borderlands were no sanctuary. They were a crossroads where pasts collided like storm fronts. Her exile had been a mercy's fracture, but this confrontation demanded more, a reckoning with the pack that had cast her out, the traitor who hunted her unlikely ally. Freedom whispered of flight, vanishing into the wilds where solitude could mend her wounds. Yet love's pull, resisted and rationalized through the night, urged her to stand, redemption not as reward, but proof, forged in the fire of choice. They emerged from the crevice as the first hunters crested the ridge, Eldrick at their fore, his form shifted to wolf, massive and midnight-furred, eyes burning with the zeal of righteous fury. Flanking him were Silverfang scouts, Thorn's enforcers among them, their scents mingling with the Ironclaw's metallic tang. Betrayal's web unfurled, her alpha's pack drawn into the rival's intrigue by promises of glory, of purging the weak to strengthen the borders. The air thickened with tension, snow swirling in eddies that stung like accusations, the metallic bite of drawn steel and bared fangs cutting through the pine's resinous hush. "Ilara?" Thorn's voice boomed as he shifted to human form, his scarred frame blocking the path, eyes narrowing in recognition and something like regret. "The pup's howl spared you death, but not folly. Return to the wilds. This is no place for exiles." His gaze flicked to Kyle, hardening to steel. "And you, fallen king, the Deuce's curse follows you. Eldrick claims your blood for the realm's peace." Eldrick snarled, circling with predatory grace, his human voice laced with venom when he spoke. "Peace? You speak of peace while your cowardice invites war, brother. The packs unite under my banner. Silverfang included, for the greater hunt, join or perish. His eyes raked over Alara, dismissing her as chattel, but the pendant flared hot against her skin, visions cascading, bloodied moons over united fronts, a war that would devour the innocent, her gift the thread to unravel it. The traitor in Thorn's ranks, a beta elder whispering Eldric's gold into willing ears, flashed clear, a moral rot at the pack's heart. Kale stepped forward, his hand finding Alara's in a grip that anchored without commanding, the contact sending visceral warmth through the chill. War is no crown, Eldric. I chose mercy over slaughter, and you drown the lands in it for a throne built on lies. His voice carried the weight of ethical melancholy, a king marked by duty's scars, refusing the easy path of vengeance. The wind howled, whipping cloaks and fur, weavos rising from the foothills as more wolves gathered, Silverfangs torn between loyalty and the allure of power, Ironclaws baying for their lost ruler's end. Alara's breath fogged the air, her body trembling not from cold, but the storm within. The pack's eyes bored into her, judgment from those who had exiled her for visions they now needed. Thorn's face twisted, conflict etching deeper lines. He had led with honor, but ambition's whisper had seduced his counsel. Forgiveness tempted, a return to the fringes if she bent, revealing nothing of her deepened sight. Freedom beckoned in the untamed wilds, love's bond with Kyle, a private flame unquenched by thrones. But war loomed, Eldric's horde swelling, the choice a blade's edge. Stand silent and let betrayal consume them, or wield her gift as weapon, risking all for compassion's gamble. The pendant burned, crimson pulse sinking with her racing heart, blood from a fresh prick of thorn-like ice trickling down her chest. Visions sharpened to prophecy. If she spoke, exposing the traitor's name, the packs could fracture. Thorn redeemed, Eldric's coup crumbling without Silverfang's blades. But revelation meant war's spark, her pack's blood on her hands, the Omega who dared judge alphas. What is strength? She whispered to the wind, philosophy born of visceral ache. If not choosing mercy amid the storm? Kale's gaze met hers, silent plea and unyielding trust, his guilt mirroring her despair. Eldric lunged, claws extended, the clash erupting in a blur of fur and shadow. Kale shifting partially to meet him, Thorn hesitating as scouts surged. Alara's voice cut through the fray, raw and resonant, the Deuce's echo in her throat. The traitor is among you, Thorn, Elder Garrick, bought by Ironclaw gold. Gasps rippled, the Elder's snarl of denial lost in the melee. Chaos bloomed, Silverfangs turning on their own, Eldric's advance faltering as doubt poisoned his ranks. Blood sprayed the snow, red blooms against white, the air thick with snarls, and the copper tang of wounds reopened. Kale felled a hunter, his form bloodied anew, but his eyes sought hers across the tumult, love as proof, demanding she choose not freedom's isolation, but the perilous weave of forgiveness and war. Thorn seized Garrick, the traitor's pleas dissolving into howls of defeat, yet Eldric pressed on, a whirlwind of fury. Alara clutched the pendant, its heat searing as a vision pierced the bedlam, a path through the fray, guiding Kale's strike to disarm without death. She called it out, her voice a beacon, steering the king to Eldric's flank. The brother fell, not slain, but bound, his eyes meeting Kale's in a moment of fractured kinship. Guilt's mirror, the war averted in mercy's grasp. The pack stilled, breaths heaving in the settling snow, weavos fading to uneasy silence. Thorn approached, head bowed slightly, the weight of his lapse heavy. You've seen true, Omega, the Deuce's pathfinder. But Alara's heart warred, the cost etched in the blood at her feet. Freedom sacrificed for this fragile peace, love's bond tested in the crucible of choice. Was forgiveness redemption, or the chain of duty renewed? Kale's hand found hers again, warm amid the cold. As the moon crested higher, its silver light gilding the battlefield in ethereal judgment. The dilemma lingered, spiritual and raw. In healing another's wound, had she scarred her own soul beyond mending? The wind sighed, carrying the scent of blood and rebirth, leaving her poised on destiny's precipice. The snow lay heavy with the weight of spent fury, a pristine shroud over the ravine's bloodied scars, where crimson petals wilted into slush under the moon's receding sickle. Ilara stood amid the hush, her breath a fragile mist weaving through the settling flakes, the moonstone pendant a searing brand against her chest. Its crimson vein throbbed like a captured heartbeat, echoing the pulse of the world remade, or unraveled, in the span of a single, shattering dawn. Kale's hand lingered in hers, calloused and warm, a tether forged in the crucible of claws and choices, yet the touch stirred not triumph, but the ache of what had been sacrificed on this frozen altar. The packs encircled them, Silverfangs and Ironclaws alike, their forms shifting uneasily between wolf and man, eyes reflecting the ethereal silver that gilded the scene like a divine judgment. Thorn knelt before the bound Eldrick, the traitor's midnight fur matted with defeat, his snarls reduced to ragged whimpers that dissolved into the wind's mournful sigh. Garrick, the elder exposed by Ilara's unerring vision, lay chained nearby, his pleas a hollow echo swallowed by the pines. The air hummed with the aftermath, the copper tang of blood mingling with pine resin, the distant crackle of thawing ice, and the soft patter of snowflakes kissing wounds that would scar but not kill. Mercy had crowned the fallen, as her voice had demanded, not in slaughter's easy release, but in the harder forge of restraint. Yet Ilara's soul trembled on the precipice, the revelation of her gift a double-edged blade that cut deepest into her own exile's flesh. She had chosen to speak, to unravel the web of betrayal that bound Thorn's pack to Eldrick's ambition, guiding Kale's strike with visions sharp as lunar fire. War's shadow had retreated, the united front fracturing under truth's relentless light, leaving a fragile peace etched in reluctant oaths. But what of her? The Omega once banished for folly now stood as pathfinder, her visions vindicated, yet the cost bloomed visceral and raw. The pack's gaze upon her shifted from scorn to wary reverence, a chain disguised as honor. Freedom, that solitary wild she had glimpsed in banishment's solitude, slipped away like mist, replaced by duty's unyielding grasp. Kyle turned to her, his storm-sea eyes softened by the melancholy of one who knew redemption's price all too well. Blood flecked his silver hair, his cloak rent and frost-rimed, but in his stance lingered the ethical king, guilt's weight a mantle he bore without complaint, for the war he had refused still haunted his dreams like Weavos in the void. "Ilara," he murmured, his voice a low rumble threading through the silence, intimate as shared breath. "You've woven the paths I could not see, my realm. It breathes again because of you." His thumb traced the pendant's chain, careful of the bloodied stone, the gesture stirring the instinctive pull that had resisted her reason through nights of refuge and revelation. Love was no reward, but proof, a test of souls scarred by rejection, demanding they choose union over the isolation that had defined them. She met his gaze, the wind whipping loose strands across her tear-streaked face, carrying the faint howl of the Silverfang peaks, as if the mountains themselves mourned the lives altered. The pendant flared once more, its crimson core illuminating fragments of what might come. A throne reclaimed not by blade, but by compassion's quiet reign, her hand in his, guiding counsels through shadowed valleys. Yet thorns wove through the vision, a sacrifice of the wild's embrace, her Omega heart forever bound to the hierarchies she had fled. Thorn rose, approaching with measured steps, his scarred brow furrowed in the gravity of atonement. "The Deuce's will bends us all," he said, voice resonant with reluctant wisdom. "Your exile ends, Pathfinder. Return as seer, or claim what the moon grants beyond our borders." The choice crystallized in the cold air, moral and spiritual, a crossroads bathed in silver light. Forgiveness tempted, amending with the pack that had shattered her, weaving her gift into their survival, curing the fractures of betrayal. Yet it chained her to the fringes anew, her visions bent to Alpha's whims. Freedom whispered of vanishing with Kale into the untamed foothills, their bond a private rebirth, untainted by thrones or packs. But love demanded more, union as the ultimate proof, a sacrifice where she stepped fully into destiny's weave, healing not just him, but the realms scarred by ambition's blood. What was Renacimento, if not rising from rejection's ashes to crown mercy over power? The philosophy settled in her bones, visceral as the snow's chill yielding to inner fire. Ilara's fingers tightened around Kale's, the pendant's warmth spreading through them like molten silver, its bloodied heart sinking with the rhythm of their shared resolve. "Not return," she declared, her voice steady, poetic in its quiet thunder, rising above the pack's murmurs. "But forward, with him. The paths diverge here, Thorn. Let the silver fangs guard their borders in peace, as the Dusa intends. My visions serve no crown alone, but the balance of blood and moon." Gasps rippled, weavos of uncertainty rising from the ranks, but Thorn nodded, the weight of his lapse lifting slightly in her mercy's shadow. Eldric's eyes met hers, not with hatred, but a fractured gleam of understanding, the traitor glimpsing his own potential for redemption, bound yet spared the final blade. Kale drew her close, his embrace a bulwark against the wind's lament, the contact igniting the bond fully accepted, resisted no longer, rationalized through trials of fear and flight, now embraced as eternal thread. The moon dipped toward the horizon, its light fracturing across the snow in prismatic veils, as if the Dusa herself wept tears of ice for the rebirth unfolding. Ilara leaned into him, the pendant cooling to a gentle pulse, its crimson stain a symbol transmuted, from exile's wound to union's vow. They turned from the ravine, steps synchronized in the deepening dawn, leaving the packs to their oaths and reckonings. Behind them, the snow began to heal, blanketing blood in white forgiveness, while ahead stretched paths unseen, mountain veils parting to reveal temples of lunar stone where fire and frost would forge their shared destiny. In that moment, rejection birthed royalty, the Omega's quiet strength healing the king's hidden scars. Love proved itself not in glory's roar, but in the soft hush of choice. Sacrifice for Cura, union as the flame eternal. The wind carried their scents into the wilds. A new legend whispered on Uivos distant and true, where every wound found its healer, and every soul its moonlit home. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe. Because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.